This is the session on legal platforms, APIs, and the revolution of Whizzbang LegalTech with Joe Raczynski from Thomson Reuters. I'm Alicia Copeland. Now I'm going to introduce our speaker, Joe Raczynski. He is an innovator and early adopter of all things computer related. His primary focus is around the future of technology, and he speaks around the world about legal technology, cybersecurity, blockchain, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and drone technology. He also writes about the future of technology as it impacts the crossroads of our personal and professional lives, especially in the legal sector. He is a co-host of a podcast with a tech focus and serves as a mentor with the Columbia IBM Blockchain Accelerator, is a cybersecurity committee member at the University of South Florida, and is a presidential committee appointee to the American Bar Association Center for Innovation Governing Council. Currently, Joe is with Thomson Reuters Legal, managing a team of technologists for both the large law, corporate, and government divisions in the U.S. Joe serves the top law firms in the world, consulting on legal trends and customizing Thomson Reuters legal technology solutions for enhanced workflows. After the session, you can connect with him on his website, joetechnologist.com, josephraczynski.com, or on Twitter at JoeRaz. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
Alicia, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone being here today. I'm absolutely looking forward to this. I think it's going to be an amazing time to go through some of these concepts that are really kind of cutting edge. There are things that are starting to filter into the legal industry, and I love talking about them. So without further ado, let's get into it. The agenda today is what is going on with LegalTech and the LegalTech platform. So what is happening? Why are we even talking about this right now? So we'll talk about that first. What is a platform? So platforms are all around us. We don't think about them day to day, but I want to point out why they're important and why people across the globe are using them in different ways. So the first example is just a general platform. Then we'll get into legal platforms. So the legal examples, how they're starting to impact the industry, both the business and the practice of law. And then, of course, we need to get into what the heck are APIs. And you hear API every once in a while, you're like, what is that? Let's get into that. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I'll do a live demo talking about how an API even interacts with things, just to conceptualize how these bits and bytes of information are being exchanged so that we have a better idea for how things are working. And then lastly, we'll get into where the industry is going with APIs and legal platforms. So let's talk about the current state of legal tech right now. Legal tech infusion. I have been in the industry for probably too long. I've been 15 years. But over the last, I would say 5 years, there's been an explosion of what's going on in legal tech. It's having an impact across the board for everyone. It's filtering into the way that we work, the way we think, the way we interact with our clients, with each other. All of these things are coming together at this point in time, and it's amazing to see, but it's pushing us into areas that we never thought would happen as quickly as they have. Clearly, over the last year, we've even seen more of this. But there's been a massive infusion of technology into this space to the extent where, let's say, there were 400 to 500 legal tech startups about 4 years ago. Now there's 4,000 to 5,000. So this is going to have an interplay with the reason why we're even talking about the platform. Now, if you have all of these startups, what is one of the biggest concerns that you might have? Well, it's around security. Law firms, corporations, government agencies are all hyper sensitive around security, clearly for good reason. When you have these startups, when you have all these applications that we all rely on, one of the most important things is that they are secure. So one of the concepts that's out there is called containerization, which means that an application is containerized, almost like the thought or the process of containerizing something such that data, the flow of data, of information is all safe, it's secure. People that should have access to that information get access to it. People that should have access to the app get access to it. Those that shouldn't don't, right? Simple concepts, but it's important to think about these layers as we're starting to talk about this component of legal platform. So One very important aspect about all of this as we move into this idea of platform is interoperability. Too many syllables, but interoperability quite simply means that you can have this exchange of information between applications. So almost like two apps that you have on your phone. What if you wanted them to share information and you tell the apps, yes, I want app A to speak to app B, because it becomes synergistic, becomes the ability for information when you exchange that to create so much more dynamic interface that allows you to connect and build on top of that, which we'll talk about in a bit. But interoperability quite simply is this concept that allows for information within apps to talk to each other, to work together on a common interface. More about that in just a second, but I wanted to explain that initially. Second to last piece about all of this, as you start to talk about tech infusion and security being utmost importance to interoperability, is automation. When you have those first three, automation is a natural progression. You can start to automate simple things that you normally be like, do I have to take care of that now? Can't we have some computer do that or an application do that? Yes, because now you have all these pieces starting to talk to each other. The last piece that sort of ties us together for people, for organizations, is what if you had a marketplace that you could go to that allows you to bring all of these components together, and you can easily say, you know what, I want this app, I want that app, and I want them to talk to each other, and I want to buy that right now. Boom, you're able to do that because you have easy buys of these applications that allow you to use this data, to exchange data, obviously permissioned, but in a much easier way than we've ever done before. Those are the initial concepts, and now we're going to sort of extrapolate out in all different directions, but that's the basis for where we're going to go today. Okay, let's come back to platform. This isn't the legal platform. This is general platforms to start to conceptualize for what we see across the entire landscape and why it's important. We see them everywhere, right? So when we're talking about platforms, it's something that we see every day. So clearly, either you have an Android device or you have an Apple phone, right? So I'll just talk about Apple because I think most people probably tend to use those devices, even though I'm an Android guy. But in the Apple world, a platform simply means this. You have your phone, right? And on your phone, when you want to download an app, you go to the store. And the store has a list of thousands, if not millions, of apps. All of those apps have been done by developers across the globe. Apple basically said, hey, here is our platform. Here is our store. If you want to play on this store, you basically have to have agreed to all of our standards, all of our requirements around security, how things look, how things feel. And if we go on to this next slide, you know this interface, right? So you go on to the App Store, you're downloading whatever you want to download. But Apple says and dictates this with stringent guidelines. This is what that little icon needs to look like. It's got to be 150 by 150 bits across the screen, pixels across the screen. It can be only so long in terms of its title. It can only have 750 words in its description. All of these pieces are dictated by Apple such that they conform to the platform. They built the platform. Now you upload your code, you upload the description, the pictures, everything about it. That's how you start to develop this world, right? And this happens across the board. So almost every one of these platforms that's out there has the same basis for creating that platform. Platforms aren't all just digital. They're everywhere. I've read something recently, it's probably a few years ago at this point in time, where in China, obviously the growth of the population makes it so that they are thinking so far in advance that they're building towns and hypothetically cities for people 5 to 10 years in advance. Before people even move in, they're building the full city, the town. What does that look like? So I think about this picture here, right? So you have a circle, you have in the background, you can see the electrical wires. Underground, you have the gas lines, the sewage lines, the water lines. All of that is being built in advance. That's a platform. The roads, the sidewalks, the infrastructure is there. They might put some general guidelines about, okay, your buildings can only be this high or whatever the case is. So eventually they're like, okay, anybody who wants to come to this town can. You go there, you buy your property, your acre of land, and you say, all right, I want to build my office building on this acre of land, and it's plug and play at that point in time. You build your building, but then you can plug into the sewer line, you can plug into the electrical line, you can plug into the coax or the cable fiber optic line. All of that stuff is plug and play. It's a platform. So that's yet another way of thinking about platform. Some quick, cheeky examples, if I may here. Platforms create those standards, right? So that things should be interoperable, means that they can play and plug into other areas. The way that I like to think about this more physically, tangibly, is Legos. Lego, going back, I dare say 90 years at this point in time, built a platform. In the beginning, it was like, oh, Lego just builds Lego and they're blocks, very simple. Then they opened it up to groups that wanted to build on top of that. So the Star Wars theme, the Indiana Jones theme, all of those things start to come together to the point that if you want, you can take Indiana Jones and you can plug and snap it into Star Wars. So it might have Darth Vader up against Indiana Jones, right? I don't know why you'd want to do that, but of course, the dark side versus Indiana Jones may be the good side. Who knows, right? So that's the type of thing that you can do with platforms. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but you get the idea, hopefully. A few more quick ones that I want to throw out there. If you have Amazon Alexa, and I gotta be quiet because I don't want to trigger her right now, or Google Home, you can actually do the same sort of thing. These are platforms. You can build skills for Amazon Alexa. Very easy to do. If you ever want to go down that road, reach out to me. I'll talk to you about it. Same thing with Google Home. These are the types of things that you can do with these platforms, which are amazing and fun, but you can start to build new businesses, new industries on top of that platform, provided that you abide by their rules and regulations. One of the last ones that we'll talk about, second to last one, really goofy, but I shouldn't say that because some people might be into it. I got into it for a little while. Second Life. This is a completely virtual world, a virtual world that they built a platform. They have full earth. They have water. They have places like huge swaths of land, all this crazy stuff. And if you want to, you can bring your business down there. I had a friend who actually built a t-shirt business down there, and she's selling t-shirts with her logo on it in this pseudo cryptocurrency where people buy those t-shirts to put on the sort of avatar people that you have down there, So you can see CNN did this. So they opened up their own little outpost for CNN iReport. So if you wanted to do an iReport down there, you could do that. That's a platform as well. The last example that I'll give you, and I love to talk about blockchain, so forgive me. Ethereum is the second biggest blockchain out there. It's essentially a database, but it's a massive, massive platform that they've built such that you can build new apps that they're calling dApps, which means decentralized application. So you build your apps down there and it's connecting and interacting on that platform according to their rules, to their regulations, creating brand new industries. So decentralized finance. So basically the entire financial world is going to be upended in some respects and put onto this sort of blockchain. They have betting sites. They have cloud storage. So think about Amazon Amazon Web Services. You're actually able to create new industries down there using that sort of platform. Okay. So the final example that I wanted to mention, just to tie it all together, is probably familiar to all of us, right? You have your smart TV, you might be using your Apple devices, you might be using your Android devices, but you go to this particular space. And in this instance, it's just your smart TV, you turn it on and it has like this dynamic look. And on that, you can download your apps. So it might be your Netflix, your Amazon Prime, your iHeartRadio, NBC, all of the apps know to play in this environment. You might have to log into each one of those, although that's changing soon too. But you log in, it interacts with that device because that's the platform. It says, okay, you can download your Netflix, and through that, you can pull that up and you can get to the content that you want to eventually get to. That's a platform. All right. You get the idea. So the essence of a platform, and I pulled this together thinking, all right, what does this really look like in a nutshell? 6 parts to a platform. First part is that it creates the environment. we're talking about the Apple Store. If you want to go to and pull down apps, whatever the case you want to do, it creates the basic rules and governance. So it's saying you must do this. You know, the size of that image for that icon has to be this size, the description, all that stuff I've talked about. It creates the standards. And this is huge to the industries, every industry that you're looking at, especially the legal industry. It creates the security interoperability so that if you're sharing information, it's known, it's understood, especially with all sorts of data privacy regulations that we're seeing in California, in Europe, now in Virginia. All of these things are starting to come into play and are important to be aware of. So the security component, that containerized security, is a key component to all of this. It ultimately creates a network effect so that the more apps and the more people that come into this space, it grows the platform. It makes it far more valuable, far more useful, and more groups start to come to it, play around with it, and then develop their own applications in this space. So once you get to the point where all of these pieces come together, it's game on. So that means that all sorts of innovation can start to take off, and it really starts to blossom and bloom in many different ways. So third parties that come up with an idea, any one of you that say, you know what, I want to come up with an idea. I know some specific niche of the legal market that needs some attention. You could develop this now. You can hire some coders, some developers, some user people, interface people that can actually say, okay, this is the look and feel of what we'd like to build. And then you build it in that environment so they can play in that environment. The world is your oyster. I mean, there's so many things that you can start to do so the developers can then build those apps on that platform. That's the future. And that's what we're going to start to see in the legal industry. Now, how is this taking off in the legal industry? If you've seen me talk before, I love to talk about the history because I think it's important. I think for almost anything and everything that we look at least in my myopic lens, it's important to reflect on the history of these things. So where did this all come from? Well, there's been a bunch of different groups sort of vying for this, thinking about it, playing around with it. I like to give credit to Rain in Court because the concept kind of came there first. They're like, you know what, there's so much happening in the legal tech industry. How do we try to create a platform that makes sense, that works with all these legal tech providers in a space, in a place that they can actually build out these creative thoughts? And so it started there. And then, of course, Thomson Reuters got deeply involved with this. I mean, if you think about the hundreds of different applications that Thomson Reuters has in the legal space, whether they're services or their applications, it's a natural progression. They purchased HiQ recently that allowed them to build this platform such that it's a plug and play, bring your apps, start to play in this space. There are other groups out there that are working in the same thing. There's at least 2 others that are now involved in creating a legal platform, such that it's a playground for these different groups to start to play in this space. Okay, so why? Specifically, why in the legal industry are we seeing this? Well, it goes back to what I was saying. So several years ago, there were 300 to 400, let's say, different legal tech startups. Now there's several thousand, so 4,000 to 5,000 of these groups. And they're all, and I mean this with respect, they're all kind of like these ankle biters. They're looking at the different business or the business of law or the practice of law facets, and they're saying they're experts. Traditionally, I've seen experts in their space saying, you know what, there's nothing out there right now that can actually do something that will make things better for my practice and what I've done in the past. There's so much efficiency if we're leveraging technology right now. And so they build these things out. They get a handful of people, maybe 5, 10 initially. They build out that application. But what they've done is they built this company and they built their code base. So whatever app it is, sometimes they choose all these different languages to build out their application. And then you have magnify that by 4,000 or 5,000 different groups, and they're all building their own code base. And sometimes, yeah, they're using the same code. Sometimes they're not. So that makes it so much more difficult when they're on different codes for them to talk to each other. What if you want those 2 disparate organizations or apps to talk to each other? Much more difficult. So when you have all these different groups, all of these different applications out there, you want them to be able to scale up, to talk to each other. So then you come up with this idea of let's build this sort of legal platform where they then code it to those standards such that those two apps, which normally wouldn't be able to talk to each other, can now do that. That is the huge thrust forward when we're starting to talk about this stuff. So fundamentally, if you look at the very center of this, you're talking about creating that legal platform. But then you're saying, okay, what can I do in that legal platform? Well, I can then create a document store. So all of my information, all of my pertinent documents. You can look at the marketplace. So pulling down applications across the board saying, I want to be able to have my lawyers access this sort of information. My attorneys access this information, depending on where you are in the world. The people who should have access to that stuff. Looking at activity in terms of analytics. Who's accessing which documents at which point in time? You can start pulling in financial management systems, productivity suites, your knowledge managements, your insights, in-house. All that information starts coming together. And what's really interesting about this is you start to pull in third-party integrated applications. That means you think about the app store that you might go to for your iPhone, for your iPad device. You're actually going out there, you're downloading what you're supposed to be downloading or what you're curious to download. It then will play into this environment. So in the same sense, what you're doing is you're going to go to this legal app store, and that legal app store will have all the applications that your firm, your government agency, your corporation is allowing access to because you have already paid for it. So you download that, you put it into your environment, and then it'll work with things like Microsoft Office because MS Office will also be in there. Maybe you're a G Suite organization. Some of the biggest consulting organizations in the world are using Google's suite of applications. So all that will work. And then you might have an iManage, a Kira, a Neotologica, a NetDocs, maybe Thomson Reuters applications, all playing together in this common interface. It creates amazing scale, but it also creates the ability to create this world where as we start to develop workflow, so one application speaking to another application, as you move down the line, it's a whole new world of building these pieces out together. Okay, so as we start to look at this, I'm calling it the platform trifecta. It's the ability to collaborate, to automate, and then to manage that. So all components of the organization coming together. So improving the collaboration and the engagement across the board, as well as automating those legal processes. So as we hear more about contract automation, the ability to put on the front end, all you need to gather, let's say, is 5 bits of information. Let's pretend that it is a landlord-tenant lease, something that I'm very familiar with. So when you go about that document, all you really need to do typically, depending on the jurisdiction, is looking at the landlord's name, the tenant's name, the term, so the execution of the lease, and then when it ends, all of those fun pieces. If you're able to collect that information on the front end, such that it's a simple web page that says, okay, the name of the person, when's the landlord-tenant lease, all that stuff, boom, you click go, it drops that information into the document itself, right? You're able to leverage that information going forward. What about other components that might be important in that landlord-tenant lease? Maybe it's for insurance. You can drop those parameters into an insurance document, and then that could be sent off to the insurance company. So you're only collecting that information once, but all of these other applications are then starting to pull that together, leveraging that information inside that platform. Only if you allow that information to be passed forward. So that's an important component. I know I'm talking a lot about, but it's an important part of all of this. And then managing that information, right? So who manages it? Who touches it? Who's control of it? We're seeing more project managers, legal project managers, seeing a lot of people brought into the fold to help with this automation, to help facilitate some of this. Those individuals are also being a key component to bringing this all together. So that intelligent collaboration and engagement is a very important part of the legal platform. Think about client extranets. So the ability for you to connect into your client by creating a separate space, almost like a set of web pages that allows them to see things that maybe you would normally have to email. Hey, here's the latest information on billable hours, who's done what for whomever, whatever project you're all working on, right? So all of those things start to become a little more seamless because you're allowing access to that. Document collaboration, clearly, as we talked about, project management, transaction management, portfolio management, right? So all of these pieces coming together, the intranets, so that there's a collaboration inside the law firm or the government agency, the organization, whatever the case is. Compliance is huge, making sure that people know what they're supposed to be having access to as well as not having access to, and giving those buttons, those dashboards to individuals that can then provide further guidance on this sort of thing. So the basics to this platform, when we're talking about the integrations that are going to start to blossom, global search. So the ability for you as, let's say, a practitioner to go in there and search across all of your internal documents. So let's say it's your knowledge management database, all your pertinent information in your KM system, everything, all your work product at the firm. That's typically one set of information. And then you might have information from some of your providers. Some KnowHow from your providers, or pure data on analytics that you might have out there. You're able to pull all this information. We'll talk about this in a second for how you can pull that information in, but you're able to pull all this in together by doing almost a simple global search. Think about Google, right? You do a global search and you pretty much find anything you want from that. We're moving in the direction, and a lot of firms have already gotten there. A good number of firms have already gotten there, but it's only going to become much better, much stronger, and much faster in terms of a global search, a federated search, which means that you're able to look at different data sources, pull that back under each data source and see across the board, this is coming from our internal records, this is coming from one of our vendors. Really kind of cool stuff. You could see your key contacts and your notifications. You're able to see the marketplace. Again, that sort of legal app store. So if you want an application to help doing your work, you're able to go out there, say, this is what I need, download it. It should hopefully plug and play at that point in time. Here's a concept that I think a good number of people are familiar with, but not everyone. You're probably used to seeing it in your day-to-day. SSO stands for single sign-on. And what that quite honestly means is that hopefully we're getting to a point where you have 80, 100, 120 different logins and passwords. It's too many. We can't remember all of them. So the idea is you sign in the morning on your computer. It knows who you are. It knows which practice area you're a part of, and it signs you into everything. It signs you in, of course, to all of your applications internally, but it also signs you into any of the external applications that you might have with your vendors. Single sign-on, just an easy way of getting access to the things that are important to you very quickly and seamlessly. All this stuff is talking about tasks and recent documents, so you having access to those types of things, as well as sites and activity. So we're talking about the ability for you to get access to analytics and news and insights and all this stuff being pushed to you rather than you pulling it or making requests for that. Further integrations, of course, with Outlook and Word and Teams. All of these pieces starting to go together. You might be a Google shop, so you're using Google stuff. I manage NetDocs, Kira, Neurologic, etc. So in other words, any application you could possibly imagine should be able to be played in this legal tech environment that you're talking about with this legal platform. All right, so the next piece to this is a summary of all this. So goodness gracious, when I used to meet with CIOs, let's say even 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, people, especially in the global large law firms, were very hesitant about the cloud. They were worried, justifiably at that point in time, about how the cloud is going to treat our data. We have sensitive, very, very sensitive financial information from our financial clients. What's happening with that information? Where is it? Are the rules in the US versus the EU applicable to them, and what's going on with that data? Things have changed dramatically, especially in the last year, but probably in the last 3 years, where people realize that cloud forward is the way to go. So pretty much everything in the cloud, choosing the right vendor in terms of one that's established, that is known, that has protocols that are out there that you can completely and totally vet is very important. So a legal platform is typically cloud-based. It will have this legal app store, so you can go to it. You know which you have access to. You'll be able to buy those apps. Boom, set to go. Download it. It'll integrate with your tech folks taking care of that for the most part. It is secure, as I said before, containerized, and then of course it's interoperable, so that the tech folks at your firm, your organization, will help enable that interoperability when it's necessary, when it's important to do so. All right. Now we're at a point of what does this really look like when you bake this out? What does it feel like? What does it? How do I interact with it? Well, as I said before, you log into your computer in the morning, and it's the typical Windows password, right? So you're logging in your password. It knows who you are. Maybe you're using the biometric, so you're maybe a fingerprint. Maybe you're using the face scan, whatever the case is. At that point, it knows who you are. It knows, your practice area, what you're involved with. It knows all of the particular matters that you're on. So it greets you, right? So it's saying, oh, good morning, Connie. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you from wherever you are in the world, wherever you're working these days. It shows you your tasks. It shows you all of the apps. So on the little section here, I'm going to start to use the mouse. You start to see all the apps that I have available to me. Maybe has my calendar. But as I work my way down, hopefully this will start to go down for you. It says, okay, here are your suggested documents. Here's some news alerts that you should be aware of, the latest dockets potentially. Here is your team that you're working with. It might have maybe the partner that's running the operation. It might have all the associates. It might have the legal project manager, maybe the financial people to all pull this together. What's next? My matters, recent activity, a lot of the social component of, let's say, people are talking about what's going on with a particular case at that point in time. All of that is within reach. All that's leveraging different applications you have to your advantage. So like I showed before, you start to see the apps, you see these pieces pulled together. Now, this will look any way that your organization wants to build the look and feel of this. This is the kind of cornerstone of what we're about to see. The ability to build out these things is completely up to the imagination of whomever wants to build it. And as we start to talk about the APIs in just a second, this is where it all starts to come together, because the APIs will allow you to build these platforms in a way that you can make it so that the workflows and the interaction with data and apps all start to come together. So as you can see, and this is just another example of how that could look. All right, and it'll kind of go up and it'll start to show you latest matters and key contacts and what that could like. A lot of it is visualizations. So much more on not putting tons of words on screens, but making it so that it's intuitive, that it feels open and airy. A lot of like white space, so to speak, that you've seen that I think Google started off with just a simple query line, right? All right, so when we're talking about that integration to the legal platform, draw your attention to the very center. The platform, being cloud-based, is going to interact with all of these other pieces. So the document managed, and you could have any document management organization, right? Your productivity application, so Microsoft Office or G Suite, all the other AI components. So start thinking about how AI is filtering into all components at the very beginning of the practice and the business of law, where you can start to say, okay, Kira does a great job here, maybe HiQ does a great job there, to Logic, they're awesome in this space. Well, you tap into that app and you say, app, look at this data, and then do your thing. And that's what you're just going to start to see. So document automation, of course, and then electronic signatures, another component of all this. So it starts to blend. And then you start to see on the right-hand side, you can start to break off into different sections based on what you do and where it fits into the organization. So all of these things start to come together. All right, now, in order for all of this to work, when you build that platform, you want to be able to pull in the apps, you want to be able to pull in the data. The fundamental aspect behind the scenes, but is important to be aware of, is the API. So, what the heck is an API? And why are you talking about it, Joe? Well, let me tell you. So an API is essentially an application programming interface. And what does that mean? It's kind of a gobbledygook name, right? An acronym, of course, for API basically means that you're able to pull in information across the board. It's basically computer code that says, I want to pull in information about public records from a source. Could be the federal government, could be maybe Thomson Reuters, whatever the case is. You're basically having a computer making a call saying, server or computer out here, I want public records on Joe Raczynski. I want to know his address, and I want to know, make sure his name is in the system. And so computer says, hey, call out to that. Boom, it calls out to that, and using a specific computer language, and we'll talk about that in a second. The computer says, this computer wants information about Joe, send that information back in a certain structured manner. And then the magic is that you can then take that data and do whatever you want with it. You can inject it in some form. You can create analytics about that, because what if you do that with 1 million people? You can start to extrapolate things. You can look for patterns or whatever the case is. It makes for the connection from an app or from a system to another system very easy and faster than ever before, rather than me sitting in front of a computer and going to an application saying, all right, I need to look for Joe. And in this little box, it says, look for his first name, look for his last name, click go. This does this in a much faster automated fashion so that you can do batches of information all at the same time. So APIs are the thing. They are everywhere. Kind of a silly graphic, but you get the idea. APIs are absolutely everywhere, and almost everything that you do these days leverage APIs in the back end to make sure that information is exchanging easily for you. So what are we seeing? So in one example is, you get up in the morning, and I do this sadly every day. I get up in the morning, I look at my phone, and I say, all right, what's the weather? I'm in DC, and I'm like, all right, is it nice today? Is it not? You know, I always compare that to our folks up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is where our headquarters is for the legal side. I'm always looking with envy. No, not really, because it's so cold up there typically compared to here. But I look at the app and I say, okay, what's the temperature here versus what I know is going to be going on up there with them and 2 feet of snow? And so I say to myself, all right, I'm lucky. But the weather, so that's an app. Here's another way how an API might work that we can all relate to. So you might use Uber, you might use Lyft. In this example, I'm going to use Lyft. You pull up your app on Lyft on your phone, and you're like, okay, I want to go from here. I want to go to the Washington Monument. All right, so that's about a mile away. I call it up and I say, and it knows who I am. So that's one app, one API. The second call basically is saying, where do I want to go? So I type in basically the Washington Monument. Okay, good. It knows at that point in time, using some AI, where all the cars are relative to me. It already has my information about my payment information. It knows where I want to go, so it's able to determine through an API the distance. So it's leveraging Google Maps. So that's another API saying, okay, let's pull up the Google Maps. All of these things are computer-to-computer calls, leveraging pieces of information that's able to pull back. And then from there, you're able to create an ecosystem that allows for all this interconnectivity of information in a very usable and understandable sense, such that it's using the payment, it's using the maps, again, another API call. And fundamentally, what are we seeing? We're seeing, okay, I'm being picked up here in front of my address, and I'm being taken there. And behind the scenes, these computer-to-computer calls, these APIs are going on, but it's making life far more easy for me, and they're working together in concert to allow me to do things that I've never been able to do before, let's say 5-6 years ago on that side. APIs are everywhere. This is a small subset of every single type of API that's out there. If I were to click on each one of these, there's another page of 50 different APIs that have been programmed so that I can then interact with the weather or a restaurant. So I can create a restaurant API so that I can then interact with an application that allows me to look at all the restaurants in my area that are serving Mexican food or Chinese food or whatever, subsets of information that you're able to go back and forth about. So how does this actually work? Well, this is how, and this is why it's important. So I'm going to go through this, and hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. How someone, a programmer, would actually do this. A post, and this is really hopefully straightforward. A post is the first thing that you're going to do. It's a send request. So think about when you make a request in Google, you're typing in a search term. That's technically called a post in the API world. It means that you're going to send a bit of information off to the server that I talked about before. And the server then says, oh, I got this information from Joe. Now I need to return some information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the application that you see off to the right-hand side. So I'm going to do the weather app. So I'm going to post that I want basic information about the weather in, I think in Moscow. Yes. So I'm going to say, I want to know the weather in Moscow. And so I post that information. It's actually sending that information to this API. So it's api.openweather.org. It's saying, this is going to be data. This is our version 2.5. And then basically at the end, it's appending, they want to know the weather for Moscow. It's as simple as that. So it's a URL that's being sent to, with the very end saying, this guy wants to know the weather of Moscow. I don't know why he wants to know that, but he wants to know the weather of Moscow. And so it's going out to that server, that weather server that you see here. And then the get is the return. So the information that's being sent back is this. At first you might be like, oh, geez, Joe, I don't know what. Okay, so look at the blue. It's saying the coordinates, as I'm sure you all gathered at this point. There's the coordinates. So the coordinates, it's saying Moscow in quotes, and that's the sort of latitude, longitude for Moscow. And this is the cool part about APIs. The programmer basically says, you know what? I want to put Moscow in this app on the right-hand side up here. So I want to label this when the information comes back to be up there. So Moscow is put out there. And then additionally, the information that comes back is more weather information. So it's saying the main section here, I want them to describe it as clear. I also want to put the temperature in there. So it's 9 degrees Celsius. Not the best of weather. So you get the idea. So all this information is a give and go. The information is requested, very simple. Moscow, the information that comes back in this code such that developer can put it in any way he or she wants to when it comes back into that app. So that's the interaction of an API when it comes to an application like this, like a weather application. You can see there's a lot of information. If you want to go through that, you can see there's a direct correlate for the way that that information gets sent and then comes back. So it comes back in a data set that you then are able to map over. So I'm not expecting any one of you to go through and read every one of these paragraphs. But what I want you to do is highlight, I guess, a few terms that the world in the API world are sort of geared to. So SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol. What does that mean? It's just a term, a form of APIs. It's a type of API that some people use to exchange information. That's all. Then there's the RESTful or REST API, which is representational state transfer. This is yet another one. So SOAP, and this is just me speaking as an old school programmer, SOAP is a little on the older school side. REST is used frequently with a lot of applications out there that you use in your daily life. Still popular, I would say, but there are newer ones that are coming out, one of which is called Graphical, which I hope to go into in not the distant future. So the benefits to SOAP. Okay, so it has stricter rules, advanced security. So that's why some people have used that in the past. If you're less worried about security on this front because it's data that should be openly available, it's not that concerning in that space, you'd probably go with a REST API because there's minimal bandwidth concerns. It's really fast. It's very targeted. It's a little bit easier as a programmer standpoint. It was easier for me to program in that sense. A few other quick terms. JSON is something people say. Some people call it JSON. JSON is the way I always, a little bit long O on that side. Supports only text and numbers. Focuses mainly on data and has a lower sense of security. XML, huge fan of. You probably have heard about this one in the past. It's kind of neat. I'm a little on the anal retentive side. I like things ordered and structured. XML is fantastic in that side, and I'll show you what it looks like because it's just so simplistic. Anybody can look at this and be like, yep, I get it. I see how this programming language and the return of information makes sense with XML. So we'll talk about that in just a second. All right, so I want to give you an example of where we're starting to see APIs in search in the legal industry, a tangible example of things that are starting to take off. So litigation analytics basically takes information that we have from dockets, and you're able to search on docket information. And sometimes it aggregates that information and say, okay, this firm has been in IP for ages, and they're working with these particular clients. And you can see the trends. You can see that Apple might be working with X, Y, and Z law firms out in California, maybe in New York, wherever, that specialize in IP, because you can look at the trends with that, right? So you're able to pull that information back. You're able to look at judges' decisions, things like that, right? So in this example, in this application of litigation analytics on Westlaw Edge, you're able to actually do a search. And this search we're talking about, as you can see in the top, it's not big. We're doing a search on Jill Steinberg. And she basically, we're saying, okay, what is everything that she's filed on from January 1st, 2016 to now? And you can go in here and you can see this box, you can do the search on Jill and find out all that information. And then you're able to pull that back, and it pulls it back nice and perfect for you in this interface. So you see the docket analytics, you're able to see all the information you want to do, all the torts, all the negligence, all the real property that she's been involved with over the years. So it's kind of a cool, neat little thing to have there. Now, that's if you went into the application yourself. What if you wanted to go a different road and do this via an API? So instead of seeing this interface, you wanted to build your own search because you wanted to do this in that legal platform, because you want to create something that's totally in a different way of going about this, building out a workflow that leverages that sort of search to display it in a different fashion. And the world is your oyster when it comes to your own imagination about how you want to do that. So you're going to do the same thing. So we're searching the same exact parameters. So Jill, 1/1/2016, we're using the firm development staff to look at how we want this to play. And instead, you're using an application that you, as a practicing attorney, do not have to worry about. Your programmers are actually doing this. So at that sense, what we're talking about is a bunch of code. And over on the left-hand side, I'm going to do a live version of this in a second because I know it's a little bit small for you. But in this live version, you'll be able to see that this is the search parameters, and this is the results that you're going to see. The same sort of thing. But once you're able to take the search and the results behind the scenes, you're able to do a lot more. You can do some really funky, cool things that hopefully we can do right now. So what I'm going to do is jump over to my version of, okay, so hopefully we are live. And what you see is that same search. We have Jill Steinberg, and then we're talking about the same date. And then this is, we're going to be looking for some docket number, some court name. We're looking at some case types, some labeling. And then your computer, and again, you do not have to do this, but your programmers would do this, are basically going to run that search. Hopefully this will work for me, doing this live. And what's being pulled back is the same sort of results you saw in the Westlaw Edge litigation analytics profile, but the information is coming back in pure code. So it allows them to say, you know what, this is the information that we want to target. We want to create a specialty format or workflow on this. Now we have the code to do this. And this is kind of the way that XML would work. You can clearly understand this if you look at it. Okay, this is the total result count. All right, I get it. So that means there are 468 possibilities that Jill was a part of, as well as we can look at the finite information for each one of these things. We can look at the practice and procedure, the appeals, the labels of all this information. Now, we're able to do something with that. And so this is just something that a firm could build internally, right? This isn't an application that is anything that's out there right now. This was the decision that like a firm wanted to build to say, oh, this is the profile for Jill. And in this sense, we're talking about, that Jill has all of her basic information, talks about her where she's based, all of her information. It has all the judges that she's worked with in that period of time during different matters, has the practice groups that she's a part of, maybe the bar memberships, has opposing firms. All of this information is basically leveraging that code that we just saw over here. So the code that's coming back is being curtailed and being brought over with respect to that information. So fundamentally, what you're able to do is take that code that's coming back using that API with the same information that you might have on the Edge platform, the Westlaw Edge platform. You're pulling that back into an interface that makes sense based on what the firm wants to do. So that's what we're thinking about. That's what we're starting to see in this space. So that's what we're going to do going forward. Now, let me jump back over to this and see what we're doing from current slide. All right. So there's other ways of doing this as well, right? So we have, like I was saying, it's up to your own imagination about what you want to do. So in this instance, there is this idea that you can create your own practice area pages. You might be able to create something for your own clients, a client page, and then you're pulling back information from more resources. When there's more APIs that will be available, there's greater data feeds that can come in, such that you might be able to have that organization at the very top. You'll have the connections into that in terms of client contacts or all the other information out there. It might be news clips, might be other pieces. It's really an amazing opportunity to start to take advantage of those APIs on the legal platform in an environment so that it knows who you are. It knows, and that's for the good, nothing about something creepy, but it knows who you are. And you're able to interact with all of that such that information's pushed to you. It's much more responsive in that sense as well. So what are we starting to see? Well, we're starting to see more and more applications or platforms being leveraged such that the platform's not just going to be on your computer, but it's also going to be on your phone, right? So you're pulling up that application that allows you to interact with that app. So it's reformatting on your phone, and then you're able to see it in a different dynamic fashion. So that interoperability model is something that we're really focused in on. So it's the APIs, it's the SDK. So if you haven't heard of an SDK before, an SDK enables the creation of APIs. So it's a standard development kit. That's what it sort of stands for. It means that there are a bunch of different APIs that are bucketed together so that you can then start to leverage different APIs to do different components to bring all of that together so that you may have an API based on authentication. So it knows that that API only deals with knowing who should have access to what. Layered on top of that or next to that might be the application for the data around the individual, as they might, yes or no, have access to public records. Should they have access to public records? Should they have access to litigation analytics? All of those things start to work together such that you have that kit that allows you to build towards that. It's using that SSO, so it knows who's available and if they should have access to whichever apps that are out there. And as we talked about before, you're getting to the point where you're able to leverage all of these distinct applications together. So that's what we're talking about when we're looking at all of this and when you start to combine all of this legal platform in the broader perspective and the world vision on the legal platform. So APIs, when we're talking about know-how and practice and practical law, same sort of thing. So way back when I first started to program some of these things, one of my colleagues thought about this as the swivel chair example. And when we're talking about the swivel chair, back in the day, and still to this day, you might have multiple screens up, right? And you're like, okay, I'm going to work on one application and I'm looking at this screen. Then I swivel over to this chair and I'm working on that application. So we talk about this as a swivel chair. And fundamentally, it's two applications that you're like, all right, I got to work over here to do this. You got to work over there to do that. What if you're able to combine that? Or if you're able to bring the data together such that they can start to overlay each other and work in a much more seamless fashion? Well, we're starting to see that. So in the knowledge management area where there might be some pain points about being able to get access to things internally plus externally, you're now able to start to see this stuff blend in a really perfect way such that all right, you have your own internal knowledge management store of information where only the firm has access to it. And then only the subset of the individuals that should have access to that information have that. So you have all the parameters built in that. But then you're like, you know what? We have an awesome firm. We have an amazing amount of know-how. But we also understand that there are maybe some other enhanced workflows that we can sort of build out on. Or maybe it's a practice area that we want to continue to develop and we have some expertise. We want to leverage some further expertise. And so you reach out to another source, and it might be Practical Law, it might be some other source. We're able to pull that information back. So not only do you have your own internal document store that you want to do a search on initially, but at the same time, you're pulling back information from this other repository through an API in your legal workflow on that platform that pulls all that information back. So you do a quick search and you want to do this enterprise search and you're looking for patent application prosecution overview. Well, it's searching your own internal information. Maybe it's searching that external information, and it's overlaying all of that together in one place to make this far easier in terms of just the way you go about it, far more efficient. And you also get access to all the other stuff that's going on. So maybe pushing contents that might be pertinent to things, be it docket alerts or whatever is going on, all this data information is coming back to you. And again, what's neat about this is that you can leverage these APIs not only for this legal platform, but if you have something like a SharePoint. I mean, this is possible to do right now. And this is yet another interface. So it's up to the firm and how they want to take this information and pull it back into your system. So in this example, you might be able to leverage the API from Practical Law, pulling it back and enhancing that with maybe some of the information that you have in your document management system. So your DMS might be iManage, might be some other group. Again, all this information coming together in one common interface. So we are finally at the point where the final goal in all of this, as I've sort of spoken to a few times, but just to encapsulate it all in one final vision, is that because there are so many different applications out there, so many startups, so many applications from known organizations, that it only makes sense to develop this common interface such that you can develop all these applications, they can meet the stringent security requirements, they can meet the data flow aspects of it, they can work together through that interoperability. They can leverage each other, right? The applications talking to each other. All of this starts to come together. And you get to the point where because of the security, because of the interoperability, because of the applications talk to each other, the APIs being able to build new things, there's going to be a lot of organizations, law firms that are starting to do this. They're coming up with new workflows, new ways of leveraging your expertise as an attorney practicing in a specific area and saying, hey, what can we do to build a new book of business where we can leverage this technology, these ideas on this platform to make our clients uniquely special in a way, because you're able to build these things out and enhance this workflow, leveraging all these tools, all these technologies together to create this whole new world where maybe some organizations aren't doing that. You have now the advantage. You can go to those pitch conversations, you can talk about these things and saying, hey, now I have the opportunity to leverage this because I'm working in concert with the specialty partners or attorneys that know this IP practice in and out, this niche so well. We're leveraging these tools, we're leveraging these APIs. We've built these workflows. All of this comes together now, and it's going to be a fascinating period forward. I'm absolutely looking forward to it. I think it's a time that is going to be uniquely special. Sometimes I talk about the legal industry a little bit further behind the curve. They're catching up. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the financial industry, so in fintech and startups, working with various organizations talking about what's going on the bleeding edge of technology. And part of that is pulling those ideas, those concepts back into the industry. And this is just one of those. So this is one area that I've been talking about APIs for probably the last 12 years within my organization, like pulling forms saying, hey, this is something that's going to be important. I've heard a lot of the biggest firms saying, we want this. We want leverage and access to this information because we can do things that if we have access to this, we can build out things that are unique for us and for our client base. And as an aside, if you're not a large law firm, what's really cool about this, there are partners out there that you can work with that will help you start to build these things out, start to bake these ideas out. Maybe you're a medium-sized firm, maybe you're a 50-person shop. There are another number of organizations that will work with you on that. I've talked with a lot of law schools Sometimes some of these law schools are actually combining law schools with engineering schools, with business schools, to help law firms start to come up with these ideas, to build out these applications, to leverage this information. Um, it's like I've said, it's an amazing time. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going on in this space. That's where I think we are at. Hope that this was something of value to you. I am, sadly, or better or worse, omnipresent when it comes to these conversations. I love it. I'm very passionate when it comes to anything legal tech, anything technology really, and how it filters into this space. If there's ever a time that you want to reach out to me and talk about some of this stuff, I am more than willing to do so. We have a team of people that are also happy to talk about this stuff. So feel free to reach out to me. You can see some contact information there at the bottom left-hand corner. Looking forward to that conversation, folks. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Take care and enjoy the rest of your days.